When the doctor looked up and asked, "Who should be listed as the mother on the birth certificate?" My mother-in-law didn't even hesitate. She glanced at my father-in-law, then stared straight at the doctor and said, "We don't want her name on it." I was still in the hospital bed, exhausted and trembling, my newborn son swaddled in the bassinet beside me. My body was weak, but my heart sank with a sharp, crushing weight. I turned to my husband, Nathan. He didn't say a word. The room went silent. The air turned cold. The doctor looked over at me, waiting. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't have the strength to fight anymore. I thought that was the end of it. I thought they had won. Then, without a word, the doctor picked up the clipboard, handed it to my in-laws, and said, "Actually, that's not your decision anymore." Their faces dropped. In that moment, everything shifted. And I knew. They weren't just trying to control the birth. They were trying to erase me. But what happened next changed the way I saw myself and my entire family forever. I never imagined that giving birth would feel like stepping into a war zone. Not with my own body, not in a hospital, and certainly not with the people who were supposed to be family. My name is Jaya Morgan. I'm 28 years old, married to Nathan, and just gave birth to our first child, a beautiful boy named Malachi. But before I held him in my arms, before I signed that birth certificate, I was holding on to my identity by a thread. Nathan and I met 3 years ago. He was charming, quiet, dependable. I loved how he listened without interrupting and how he always seemed calm, even when things got tough. We weren't perfect. We moved fast, maybe too fast. But when I found out I was pregnant last year, there was no hesitation. We got married, and I thought we were going to figure everything out together. What I didn't count on was how hard his parents would fight to keep me out of the picture. Elaine and Gerald Morgan never accepted me. From day one, I could feel it. I wasn't from the kind of family they respected. I didn't have the right background, the right voice, the right degree. I worked as a preschool teacher and took night classes online. I wasn't polished. I wasn't one of them. They never said it outright, but the message was always clear. I wasn't good enough for their son. Things got worse after we moved in with them. Nathan had lost his job during a company layoff, and with a baby on the way, we needed help. I agreed to stay with his parents until we could get back on our feet. I thought I could handle it. I told myself it would only be a few months, but from the moment we stepped into their house, it was like I disappeared. Elaine took over everything. She planned our baby shower without asking me what I wanted. She called my baby her grandson like I was just the vessel. She criticized everything, from the brand of diapers I bought to the names I liked. When I suggested Malachi, she wrinkled her nose and said, "That sounds made up. Why not something strong, biblical?" As if my choice didn't matter. Gerald didn't speak much, but when he did, it cut deep. "If Nathan had listened to us, he wouldn't be in this mess," he said once while I was sitting right there. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. He just made it clear that in their eyes, I was a mistake that couldn't be undone. Nathan tried to keep the peace. He would say, "Just ignore them. It's only temporary." But how do you ignore people who are actively trying to erase you? Every time I spoke up, it became a fight. Every time I tried to assert myself, I was made to feel dramatic or unstable. So I stayed quiet. I stopped inviting friends over. I stopped dreaming out loud. I just focused on growing a healthy baby and getting through it. By the time I went into labor, I was already worn down. We drove to the hospital in silence. Nathan held my hand, but I felt alone. I kept waiting for him to tell his parents to back off, to protect me, to draw a line. But he never did. When we arrived, I was in pain, scared, and vulnerable. They wheeled me into the delivery room, and while I was trying to breathe through contractions, Elaine walked in and started rearranging things like she owned the place. "Let's get these lights dimmed. It's too sterile in here," she said, directing the nurse like it was her house. The nurse politely told her to wait outside until we were ready. Elaine didn't like that. She gave me a cold look and said, "You better not try to shut us out. This is our grandchild." I said nothing. I had no energy to fight. I focused on breathing, on staying calm, on not breaking apart. The labor was long and painful, but I did it. I delivered my son. And for a brief moment, the room was filled with nothing but his cries, my tears, my joy. That moment belonged to me, until they tried to take it. When the nurse brought in the birth certificate paperwork, I felt a small flicker of validation, something official, something real. But then Elaine stepped forward and said, "We'll fill that out," like it was her right. I should have spoken up. I should have screamed. But I was exhausted. I was bleeding. I was stitched. I had just pushed life into the world, and I didn't have the strength to argue. I looked to Nathan, hoping he would say something. He didn't. And that's when the doctor walked in. What happened next would change everything, because in that moment, someone finally stood up, not just for me, but for what was right. The birth of a child is supposed to be sacred. It's supposed to be yours. But mine felt hijacked the second my son took his first breath. After hours of labor, I was numb from the waist down, drenched in sweat, and mentally hanging on by a thread. The nurses had cleaned up, wrapped Malachi in a soft blue blanket, and placed him in the bassinet next to me. He looked so small, his face barely the size of my palm. He was perfect, and I was completely drained. Nathan stood near the window, staring out at the parking lot. He hadn't said much since the delivery. I kept watching him, hoping he'd come to me, say something reassuring, anything to make me feel like I wasn't alone in that room. But instead, he stayed quiet, like he had during every moment when I needed him to speak. Elaine and Gerald arrived shortly after the baby was born. They weren't in the delivery room, but the moment they entered, it felt like they owned the space. Elaine marched right to the bassinet and started cooing over Malachi. "Look at him. He has Nathan's nose. He's definitely a Morgan." She didn't even glance at me. Gerald stood by the door, arms crossed. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded slowly as if approving something he had built. I was still lying there, my gown stained with blood, my body trembling from the aftermath of birth, and they barely acknowledged me. A nurse walked in with a clipboard. She smiled politely. "Hi. We'll need to get some information for the birth certificate, name, parents, and any other details you'd like listed." Elaine immediately stepped forward. "We'll handle that," she said. Not we, as in Nathan and me. We, as in her and Gerald. The nurse looked confused. "Actually, we'll need the mother to fill this out." Elaine's tone shifted. "She's in no condition to make legal decisions right now. It's best if we take care of it. The baby will have our last name, obviously, and we don't want her name listed, just the father's." My ears started ringing. My throat closed up. I felt the sting of tears, but I didn't cry. I looked over at Nathan. He turned away. I felt invisible. The nurse didn't respond right away. She seemed caught off guard. That's when the door opened again, and Dr. Caldwell stepped inside. He was a calm, thoughtful man in his early 50s, with kind eyes and a quiet strength that made people listen. He asked, "Everything okay in here?" Elaine spoke first. "We're just getting the birth certificate sorted. We'll be signing for the baby's father. We're not including the mother's name." I waited for him to correct her. I waited for someone, anyone, to push back. No one had before. I had spent 9 months being silenced, steamrolled, ignored. I had stopped expecting people to fight for me. But Dr. Caldwell didn't look at Elaine. He looked straight at me. His voice was steady and firm. "Is that what you want, Jaya?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I didn't know how to answer. I was afraid of making it worse. I felt Nathan's parents staring at me, waiting to see if I'd make a scene. I had no fight left in me, so I nodded slightly, not because I agreed, but because I didn't know what else to do. He paused. Then he turned back to Elaine and Gerald, held out the clipboard, and said, "That's not your decision anymore." Elaine blinked. "Excuse me?" Dr. Caldwell's voice didn't waver. "Jaya is the legal mother. She just gave birth. This is her decision. Unless the father contests it, which I assume he doesn't, her name goes on the birth certificate." Gerald's voice cut in, low and sharp. "She's not stable. This isn't about legal rights. It's about what's best for the child." Dr. Caldwell ignored him. He handed the pen to me. "Jaya, you can write your name here." I took the pen. My hand shook so badly I could barely hold it. My name looked messy. The ink smeared a little, but it was there, in black and white. Mine. Elaine's face twisted. "You're making a mistake." I didn't respond. I looked down at Malachi, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm in the room. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I had been afraid for so long, afraid to speak, afraid to take up space. But now I was holding the proof that I mattered, that I was his mother, and no one could take that away from me. That was the day I stopped letting them speak over me. The pen was still in my hand when Dr. Caldwell stepped aside. The room had gone quiet again, not the soft, peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that feels like a warning. Elaine stood with her arms folded, her lips pressed so tightly together they'd gone pale. Gerald was pacing slowly by the window, pretending to stay calm, but I saw the anger in his jaw. He was seething. I looked at Nathan. He was still near the corner of the room, almost as if he had faded into the wallpaper. He had just watched his parents try to erase me, and he had said nothing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him why he let it get this far. But I was still recovering from labor, bleeding into thick hospital pads, my abdomen raw and sore. I couldn't scream. I could barely speak. But my mind was clear, and I knew something had changed. The doctor had drawn a line, and now it was my turn. I handed the clipboard back to Dr. Caldwell. He looked it over, then nodded and smiled at me. Just a small, genuine expression, like he was proud. Then he turned toward Nathan and asked, "Would you like to add your name as the father?" Nathan opened his mouth, then hesitated. "Yes," he said, "of course." The nurse stepped forward, guiding him gently through the paperwork. I watched him sign, and for the first time that day, he looked at me. His eyes were heavy. Not angry, but ashamed. Elaine broke the silence again. "Nathan, don't do this. She's manipulated you from the start. You're giving her a place she doesn't deserve." He turned toward her slowly. "She's the mother of my child. She just gave birth to him. She deserves everything." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But in that moment, Nathan's voice finally meant something. Gerald stopped pacing. Elaine's mouth fell open slightly. Then she turned her face away like she couldn't even bear to look at him. I was too stunned to speak. Nathan had always tried to keep the peace. That had been his survival tactic with his parents. Say little, stay small, avoid conflict. I had spent the entire pregnancy watching him play that part, but now he was choosing something else. He was choosing me. Dr. Caldwell handed me a copy of the signed paperwork. "Everything is in order," he said. "Congratulations, Jaya." I stared at that piece of paper. My name was there. Official, legal, permanent. That document didn't just name me as a mother. It proved that I existed, that I mattered, that I had a place in my son's life no one could take away. Elaine made one final attempt. She turned to the doctor, her voice icy. "You've overstepped your authority. We'll speak with the hospital board about this." Dr. Caldwell didn't flinch. "Please do. I'd be happy to explain why I protected my patient's rights." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. He wasn't rattled. He wasn't afraid. He was just standing firm in what he knew was right. After that, the in-laws left. No goodbye, no acknowledgement, just silence, followed by the sound of the door clicking shut behind them. I didn't expect to feel relief as quickly as I did, but the moment they were gone, it was like the air returned to my lungs. The weight on my chest lifted. Nathan sat beside me. He looked at Malachi, then at me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have said something sooner." I nodded. I wasn't ready to forgive him, not entirely, but I heard the truth in his voice. I saw the guilt in his eyes. And for the first time, I believed he wanted to change. A nurse entered quietly with a small bracelet for the baby. She wrapped it around his ankle and confirmed the name I had chosen, Malachi Jace Morgan, my choice, my son. She asked, "Would you like to hold him?" I nodded, and she placed him gently in my arms. His skin was warm, his breath soft. I stared down at him and whispered, "You are mine." And in that moment, I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't small. I was his mother. That birth certificate wasn't just a form. It was the first chapter in a story I was finally ready to write. My name was on it, and that name would always be there, no matter what came next. After the birth certificate was signed and Elaine and Gerald stormed out of the hospital room, something shifted. It wasn't just the silence they left behind. It was the absence of control, the vacuum where their dominance used to live. For the first time in 9 months, I felt like the space around me actually belonged to me. Nathan stayed quiet for a few minutes after they left. He sat in the chair next to my bed, head lowered, hands clasped between his knees. I watched him, unsure what he would say. Part of me was still bracing for disappointment, still waiting for him to backtrack and try to keep peace with his parents. But he didn't. "I should have said something months ago," he finally said, eyes still on the floor. "I just thought if I didn't push back, it would keep the peace, but I let it go too far. I let you go through all of that alone." I didn't say anything right away. I looked down at Malachi sleeping in my arms. His tiny chest rose and fell against mine. His mouth made small, sucking motions, even in sleep, like he was dreaming of being held. "You didn't just let it go too far," I said softly. "You let them treat me like I didn't matter. And you stood there." Nathan nodded slowly. "I know. I didn't think they'd actually try to take your name off the certificate. I didn't think they'd go that far." "They've been going that far since we moved in," I said. "This was just the first time someone told them no." He didn't argue. He didn't defend them. He leaned forward and put his hand on my leg. "I don't want to be like them," he said. "I want to do this differently. I want to be the kind of man our son looks up to." I looked at him for a long time. I wanted to believe him, and in that moment, I did. But I also knew that promises are easy to make. It's the actions that follow that really matter. Later that evening, a nurse brought in a hospital photographer to take a newborn photo. I was still in my hospital gown, hair matted, skin pale. I hesitated at first, not wanting to be seen like that. But then I remembered what had happened earlier that day, and something in me shifted. I was tired, yes, but I had survived something most people never see, the attempt to erase me from my own child's life. So I nodded, and we took the photo. Nathan stood behind me, one hand on my shoulder, the other cradling Malachi's head. I looked straight into the camera, not smiling, just strong, just there. A mother who had fought for her place, and won. The next morning, while we were packing up to leave, a hospital administrator came by to review our paperwork. She had a warm smile and carried a folder under her arm. "Everything looks great," she said. "Congratulations again, Mom and Dad." Hearing her say that made my chest tighten, not out of fear this time, but relief. Someone had acknowledged me, without hesitation, without permission, just truthfully, simply, rightly. As she turned to leave, she paused and said, "Doctor, Caldwell asked us to add a note to your file. He said to remind you if you ever need someone to advocate for you again, you can always ask for him." I didn't expect that. My throat closed up. I nodded and whispered, "Thank you." After she left, I sat on the edge of the hospital bed and looked at the copy of the birth certificate again. My name, Jaya Morgan, right next to Mother. Just seeing it printed on the page felt like healing, not because it was validation from anyone else, but because it was proof of everything I had endured and everything I had claimed for myself. We took our son home that afternoon. Nathan and I agreed that we wouldn't return to his parents' house. He called them that night, told them we were finding a new place, and that until they could treat me with respect, they wouldn't be involved. Elaine's voice was cold and sharp through the phone. "You're throwing away your family." "No," he said, "I'm protecting mine." That was the last time they tried to cross that line. We left the hospital the next day, stepping out into crisp morning air with a brand new car seat, a hospital bag that felt twice as heavy, and a baby who had no idea what he'd already survived. Nathan held the door open for me as I climbed into the back seat with Malachi, and for the first time since the pregnancy began, I felt a strange mix of peace and purpose. We didn't go back to his parents' house. That was a decision Nathan made without asking, and it was the right one. We checked into a short-term rental with just enough room for the three of us. It wasn't fancy. The walls were thin, the water pressure low, but it was ours. It was quiet. And no one stood at the door trying to decide who deserved to be a parent. In those first few weeks, I had plenty of time to think. I spent most of it awake feeding Malachi, trying to learn his rhythms and figuring out how to calm him when nothing else worked. But more than that, I spent that time reclaiming the pieces of myself I had lost. I had entered motherhood scared, uncertain, and surrounded by people who believed I didn't belong. But I had come out of that hospital stronger than I had ever been. I I started talking to other mothers online. I found forums and message boards where women shared stories of in-laws, birth trauma, legal complications, and silent partners. Some of their stories mirrored mine, others were worse, but all of them carried the same underlying message. Too many women were fighting alone. So I started writing. At first, it was just journal entries on my phone during late-night feedings. But then I turned those entries into posts. I wrote about what happened at the hospital, about what it felt like to almost be erased from my son's story, and what it meant to finally take back my voice. I didn't expect the posts to go anywhere. They did. One by one, people began to respond. Some shared their own stories. Others simply said, "Thank you, I needed to read this." That was the moment I understood that what happened in that hospital wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who's been told to sit down and stay quiet during the most important moments of her life. It was about every mother whose voice was dismissed, whose role was questioned, whose name was almost left off the page. Nathan changed too, slowly but honestly. He started therapy to work through the grip his parents had on him. He began setting boundaries, real ones, not the soft lines he used to draw in the sand. When his mother sent a message asking to see Malachi, he didn't ignore it. He replied directly, "Until you can respect Jaya as Malachi's mother, there will be no visits." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. Nathan still has work to do. So do I. But we're doing it together now. And not from a place of fear or obligation, but from a place of truth. Our family is small, just the three of us. But it's real. And it's honest, and it's grounded in something his parents never gave us: respect. People think the most important day of a child's life is the day they're born. But for me, the most important day was the one after. The day I looked at a form with my name printed in ink and understood that no one could take it away. Not legally, not emotionally, not ever. I've kept that copy of the birth certificate in a safe place. Not because I need to prove anything anymore, but because every time I look at it, I remember what it cost. I remember what I stood up for, even when my voice was shaking. I remember who I became. I became a mother, not just biologically, not just legally, but entirely, fully, proudly. And to anyone listening who's been made to feel invisible or voiceless, I want to say this: your story matters. Your name matters. Don't wait for someone else to give you permission to take your place. You were never meant to be quiet. The moment I held that document in my hands, I understood something I wish I had known sooner. Being a mother doesn't begin when you give birth. It begins when you choose to stand up for your child, for yourself, and for the future you refuse to surrender. That's the day I stopped letting them write the story. That's the day I started writing my own. If this story moved you, if it made you think about family, about motherhood, or about finding your voice when the world tries to silence it, then don't let it stop here. Like this video if it resonated with you. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Comment below and tell me your story, or simply let me know you're out there. I read every one of them, and if you want more stories that are raw, real, and honest, subscribe to the channel. This is just the beginning. We are not here to be erased. We are here to be heard. Thank you for watching. I see you, and I'm glad you're here.